All right, great. Yep.
Sorry, did I catch you in the middle of something? Or you know somebody else? I don't know who can do it. It's not singing. You might just have to. Yeah, just press it. I'm ready to go live as soon as they're ready.
Yep, we're ready to go.
Feel good?
Yep, we're live.
In the name of the God who created each and every one of us and all living things. In the name of the Christ who teaches us. In the name of the Spirit who journeys alongside us. Welcome home, children of God. The Lord be with you. My gosh, it's so good to be back in this place after 20 months. I look back, the third Sunday of March in 2020 was our last Sunday in this building. And I know we got together a few times outdoors, but it is so nice to be back in here this morning. And for those who are not with us here in person, welcome too, as we gather together as God's people in God's name. A few announcements. If you are joining us online this morning, if you would please check in. Type your name in the YouTube chat, send a text or email, let us know you're here. And for those who are here this morning, we'll tally up everybody who's with us, everybody who's joining online. We'll give it a follow, as we do every single Sunday, to Everyone Counts initiative. Today is the 14th, so second Sunday of the month. That means that our Everyone Counts goes to ARM today, Area Resource Ministries, right down the road, about a block from here, helping to provide food and other resources to people of Hardin County. And so just by showing up today, in person or here, you are helping to support ARM. And for that, I thank you for the gift of your presence. Today, among other announcements and things to celebrate, let's see, where is Amber? Amber had a birthday yesterday. Happy birthday. Amber, we're glad you're with us, and glad you had another safe trip around the sun. We are going to have building grounds and ask if we can do a work day this coming Saturday. That's going to be the 20th at 10 o'clock here. The biggest task is probably to help get leaves up, parking lots so it's safe for people to come in and out, but maybe do other things as well. If you are free on Saturday morning for an hour or two to come by the church and help out, we're going to be together here at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. Cute. If you are joining us online, this is our first Sunday back in here with the streaming set up, using so moving everything indoors in. What I want to say is thank you for, one, your patience as we kind of figure everything out this morning. But if there are things that we can do to make the online experience better, or something is missing this morning, just please email or text me and let me know, and we'll work on that and get the kinks out over the next few weeks. So thank you for that. Nominating committee folks, we're going to be here briefly after worship this morning. We'll be downstairs at the fellowship hall. Let's see, I'm running my announcements. Chat. Viewing online. Yes, very important one. If you are here this morning, in your bulletins this morning, you'll find a very colorful slip of paper that looks like this. If you have not already turned in one of these, please help us out by getting one turned in as soon as you can. This is our pledge card for 2022. It has been hard this year, I know, with nobody being together. It's been hard to do this only online, and that's been challenging for all of us. But this year, we are still way behind on pledging. Last year, we had 50 households turn in a pledge. Right now, this year so far, we've had 30. So for those we have not heard from, please help us out and turn that in. That's kind of a critical piece for the stewardship finance personnel to be able to set a budget for next year. You have those in your bulletin. You can drop that in the offering plate this morning, mail those back, or if you need help figuring anything out or have any questions, you can see me, you can see David right here, and we'll be happy to try and help out with that. Have I neglected any announcements that you all know of? Then once again, thank you for being here today. Thank you for being with us online. It is so good to be back together. For those who are here, just one more reminder of our safety protocols. And opening back up the building session and ask that all of us throughout the service keep our masks on unless your worship leader is actively speaking or singing. Otherwise, we're all going to have our masks on all day. So as you all do, so thank you for making that possible, helping us keep one another safe. With all that said, then, friends, today is the day that God has made. So let's rejoice and be glad as we worship together. If you are here and able, invite you to stand, and who's going to lead us in our call to worship.
Our invitation to worship today is from a We Worship book by Rona Abbey, and it's a call and response, so I'll read the italicized and then we'll read the bold together. Among the poor, among the proud, among the persecuted, among the privileged,
Christ is coming to make all things new.
in the private house, in the public place, in the wedding feast, in the judgment hall,
Christ is coming to make all things new.
with a gentle touch, with an angry word, with a clear conscience, with burning love.
Christ is coming to make all things new.
That the kingdom might come, that the world might believe, that the powerful might stumble, that the hidden might be seen.
Christ is coming to make all things new.
Within us, without us, behind us, before us. In this place, in every place. For this time, for all time.
Christ is coming to make all things new. Our opening hymn this morning is number 99. My soul gives glory to my God. Remain standing if you can. Join us. I invite us who are here to take a few moments and share the peace of Christ with one another, remembering that not everybody may be comfortable being physically in touch, so you can do a fist bump, a wave, or whatever. We'll have the pins out with the color codes by next week, hopefully. For those who are online, enjoy the slideshow this morning of all our happy faces, and let's take a moment to share the peace with one another.
Yes, it's done online. Jim, sit down. Sit. Otherwise, Bill is going to think you're me.
I'm waiting for a sign from on high, which in this case means the balcony. And there it is. Our invitation to meditation this morning, and if you like, a seed thought for the week, is sacred stillness. We spend so much of our days and so much of our lives solving problems or trying to solve problems. Trying to fix something or someone, sometimes ourselves, sometimes the real problem, in other words, other people. That was a joke. We spend a lot of time talking about what to do and thinking about what to do, and that's often a very fine thing. But there is also a time for stillness. Stillness of the mind, stillness of the tongue, and yes, stillness of the body, a time to allow ourselves to rest consciously in this moment, seeking nothing and running from nothing, just content to be present in this moment. Is it refreshing? Yes. Is it renewing? Yes. Does it help with stress and things like that? Yes. But more deeply, this sacred stillness allows us once again to attune to the source of wisdom and love within us and at the very heart of life, so that we can, when it's time again, to seek solutions and to act on ideas, we can do so even more skillfully. So with that as our invitation, I invite us to enter a time of sacred stillness through meditation. And so I'd ask now that you close your eyes and assume a posture of meditation, because a long, long time ago, people who paid attention noticed that what you do with the body, you are also doing with the mind, for the mind and the body are one. So please, as you're able, sit erect and don't slump. And allow your body to become calm and quiet, still. Let your shoulders relax and drop toward the floor. And draw them back slightly as though you're trying to bring your shoulder blades together. So you're sitting with a nice open chest. Sitting in this way, sitting calmly, sitting tall, with shoulders back. Doesn't this feel like a quietly confident way of sitting? It is the embodiment of faith, of quiet confidence, confidence in ourselves, confidence in life, confidence in God. And now, in the simplest of all meditations, simply allow your mind to be at rest in this moment. Thoughts of the past may arise, and notice them and let them go. Thoughts about what will be or might be may arise, notice them and let them go. And just keep returning to sacred stillness in this moment. And so we meditate. And now, in the calm and quiet of this moment, would you please call to mind a person or a group of people, or perhaps our whole world, who you know this morning stands in special need of the healing peace of God, the peace that passes all understanding, and in your own way call upon God, call upon life itself to bless them, just as they need to be blessed. Amen.
Our reading for today comes from Amos chapter 1, verses 1 through 2, chapter 5, verses 14 through 15, and 21 through 24. The words of Amos, who was among the shepherds of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of King Uzziah of Judah and in the days of King Jeroboam, son of Joash of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake. And he said, "The Lord roars from Zion and utters his voice from Jerusalem. The pastures of the shepherds wither, and the top of Carmel dries up. Seek good and not evil, that you may live. And so the Lord, the God of hosts, will be with you, just as you have said. Hate evil and love good, and establish justice in the gate. It may be that the Lord, the God of hosts, will be gracious to the remnant of Joseph. I despise your festivals, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the offerings of well-being of your fatted animals I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream.
Thank you for reading, Bill. Thank you for that meditation this morning. So starting today, and the next really a few weeks up until Christmas, we're going to be looking at texts from what's called the narrative lectionary. It's just a suggestion of readings for each Sunday of the year. But from now through Christmas, those readings all come from the Hebrew prophets. The Jewish prophetic tradition. And we're picking that up starting this morning with a couple of excerpts, some verses kind of cherry-picked from the book of Amos. And I want to first start off by saying that I think we as Christians, and have a long history of reading the Hebrew Bible, especially the prophets of the Hebrew Bible, with a little bit of an ego problem. Because this is a religion that began as followers of an itinerant Jewish rabbi. And I think for many centuries we have been taught to read anything from the prophets as though the only thing they had to say to us, or the only thing they had to say at all, was to predict Jesus. Rather than listening to what they are saying to their culture and to the voices around them. So I'm going to try to give us a little bit of background and history on who the prophets are as we get into them, so we can try to contextualize what they're saying, not just for us, but to try to hear what they're saying in the way that perhaps some of their listeners might have heard. And I want to say that one of my seminary professors, Walter Brueggemann, was really instrumental in helping me to think about this own bias of mine when I read the prophets. And since I don't have a better or eloquent way of putting it than Walter did in one of his books, The Prophetic Imagination, I want to start with a quote from Walter. And he says, or he writes, "The task of prophetic ministry, meaning the task of the prophets, is to nurture, nourish, and evoke a consciousness and perception that is an alternative to the consciousness and perception of the dominant culture around us. And so to unpack that just a tiny bit, he's suggesting that the prophets were not walking around predicting the future, not even predicting the future of Jesus, but instead their primary function was to carry on this long tradition of pointing people beyond the culture around them, kind of the dominant culture they lived in, and to try and help them imagine a future that more closely resembled God's hope for humankind. Particularly, and we see this a lot in Amos this morning, particularly God's hope for economic and distributive justice. Now, that prophetic tradition begins all the way back with Moses, the first prophet in the Jewish tradition. Moses, if you remember the story, not only leads the Israelites out of economic bondage and slavery in Egypt to Pharaoh, but part of what he does as soon as they get out into the desert is to help communicate God's hope for humankind in setting up an egalitarian community where there is no king, no despot, where the economic system is that everyone takes only as much as he or she or they need for the day, and that in doing so there ends up being enough for everyone. So the prophet Amos that Amber read for us this morning, Amos continues on that tradition of Moses. Amos lived around probably 750 BCE, so he was 500 years, give or take, after Moses. And the book of Amos is probably most likely a collection of sermons that Amos preached over a period of time. And those sermons got collected or written down by some of Amos's followers. I have no idea what that is. Scott, any idea?
We have no idea.
Huh. I'm not really sure my theology permits things like divine intervention like that, but you gotta wonder if we're there to preach the first sermon back in the church in a year and a half, and it gets co-opted by some music. So
No, it's coming.
take it for what you will.
Yeah.
Apparently it's gone. Okay. I gotta remember where I was now. So, Amos is his book. Amos probably preached a lot of sermons, and some of his followers collected some of those and wrote them down, and that's the book that we have now, the book of Amos. And very much like Moses, Amos was a prophet. I mean,
Where is it?
it is a beautiful voice. Maybe that's what we're supposed to be hearing this morning. Yeah, that's so odd.
Hey, Paul. We're from another church. Is it coming through his? It's coming through Brian's mic. It's coming through Brian's mic.
What was that?
It was coming through your mic.
I'm so sorry. We got a bleed in from the RF factor, and it's from the local church. Most likely Calvary or First Baptist is homing into our Presbyterian experience. So,
We have an ecumenical service here.
Brian, if I may, if you want to try this microphone over here at the lectern, we're going to turn that one off because that's what's pulling it in.
You think that's where it's coming
Yes, sir.
from? Okay, we'll try that. You all know we do have a couple of wireless mics, and they operate on the airwave frequency, RF frequency, and I don't know that we've had problems before with picking up broadcasts from other churches. That's the only thing I can imagine this morning.
Come on, put this away.
That was coming
So,
up pretty
we'll
quick.
try this again. Thank you all
It's picking up on
here online for your patience as we figure this out.
Is it picking up on this one? It's right here.
Yeah, that's
So
the one
Amos.
I just killed it.
Amos preached sermons. Amos picks up in that tradition of Moses. And in particular, in Moses' concern for economic and distributive justice. And I'm sure you've heard that loud and clear in the part that Amber read this morning. Let me offer one more reminder to us. When we come across that word justice in the Hebrew Bible, or in the New Testament as well, when we talk about justice in the Bible, we are talking primarily about something that we'll call distributive justice. The just distribution of resources. We're not talking about things like criminal justice or retributive justice, retribution for somebody who has wronged you. Which is not to say that God isn't concerned with those kinds of wrongdoings and the things that our criminal justice system is ideally meant to address, but just to remind us that when we are talking, especially in the prophets and with Jesus, about justice, we're talking about distributive justice. God's concern, expressed through Moses, through Amos, is that the poor not be trampled upon for the gain of the wealthy and powerful, and that the resources that we have be shared in such a way not only that everyone has enough, but that creation is honored and celebrated and not destroyed. And so that is what justice primarily means in the Bible, and I just offer that as a reminder as we hear Amos this morning and other prophets. So by the time of Amos, around 750 BC, Israel had transitioned from this small nomadic community that comes out of Egypt into a pretty powerful monarch. And so the empire of Egypt, the Pharaoh that the Israelites had been rescued from, has now become the kind of empire that the Israelites have created for themselves. And so there's a powerful ruling class and a desperate peasant class. The desperate peasant class was suffering and starving while the elite feasted. Much like I think we are discovering in our own country, the economic disparity in Israel at the time of Amos was both tremendous and unsustainable. And one example of that, the infant mortality rate of the peasant class was over 40%. And the life expectancy of the peasant class was about 30 years. But compared to the wealthy class, it was about 60 or 70 years. So it was a pretty tremendous disparity in Amos's time if we have resources that we didn't. So Amos, in all of his prophecies reflected in this book, offers a passionate indictment of economic injustice. And the bit at the end of what Amber read for us this morning is perhaps the most well-known of Amos's words. And frankly, as someone whose profession is in part to plan and lead religious services, Amos's words are a little bit disturbing. So, Amos, claiming to speak for God here, says, I hate, I despise your religious festivals. Your worship services with your fine music and your beautiful offerings and your obviously erudite preaching bring me no joy. What I desire instead is that justice flow like a river, nourishing everything in its path. So Amos is kind of directing this to the wealthy elite of his day as well as the religious leaders of his day. But I think many of us, at least many of us who live relatively comfortable middle-class lives, and moreover who find ourselves content with the current political and economic system because it benefits us, I think we're part of that group that Amos might be speaking to. And so if that's the case, then pose the question, what can we 21st century Western Christians, what do we do with the message like the one we get from Amos this morning. One thing I think is, as a church, Amos is calling us to look beyond charity as the only solution to poverty. Charity is necessary, but it is not the answer. We've heard politicians argue for decades that faith-based charity is the most efficient and effective means to address poverty. But Amos and Moses and even Jesus are not using their prophetic voices to ask the king to increase his charitable giving, or to ask Pharaoh or Pilate to increase their tithe. Instead, they're talking about a world in which the domination systems of the world are replaced by something more closely approximating a more just and a less violent culture for everyone. They're all talking about freedom and liberation from an economically exploitative system that is legitimated by religion. And if those words don't hit home for us as 21st century Western American Christians, I'm not sure what does. Which is not to say that charity is not important. It is, and I'm grateful that this church takes that need seriously in our community. But I think the problem that Amos highlights is that the economic system that results in the need for charity in the first place, a system in which the wealthy and the powerful, and indeed probably most of us, have consistently treated the earth as if it belongs to us more than others, as if its resources belong more to some people than to all people. And we don't have to look too far in our own cultural history to see that our plundering of natural resources in Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East has contributed to our own economic gain as a nation. And our justification for doing that has long been, I think, kind of grounded in the idea of American exceptionalism. That we are somehow number one in the world, most favored by God above all others. Because Israel had developed the same kind of mentality. Israel had their own idea that they were handpicked by God to be number one in the world, and so what does God do to address that? But it takes a prophet like Jonah, sends him to Israel's most despised and hated enemies in Nineveh, and tells Jonah to go tell the Ninevites that God loves them too. And I don't share this as an indictment of our own country, but I mention it because I think that this idea of American exceptionalism influences the way that we see the world around us and the way that we encounter texts like Amos. In particular, I think that Amos, like Moses, and like Jesus, envisioned something more than just increased charity or increased giving. So if you're anything like me, when you read or when we hear a text like Amos, it's difficult to not come away feeling guilty, somewhat for our privilege, or despondent over the enormous problem of global poverty and economic exploitation. But I also think to read Amos as simply an indictment of our own privilege and wealth is one of those ways that maybe our reading of the Bible is influenced by our culture, especially our culture of individualism. Because we have a long history of making Christianity out to be only about individual belief or individual action, rather than communal welfare. One of the ways that translates is that wealth has become a metric, a gauge of our favored status in God's sight. If we're wealthy, it's a sign that we work hard, that God has rewarded us with material gain. We can mean that as an individual, as a community, as a country. If we're poor, we take that to mean a sign that we've squandered opportunities and God is somehow punishing us for not being industrious enough. I think what Amos is trying to draw our attention to is that the concerns are not about how much money we have, but the kinds of conclusions we draw around money and wealth. So for us, perhaps us who have some degree of privilege, how are are we going to use our resources and our influence to support change? Amos is not saying get rid of your wealth so that you can be a better person. That idea is simply too individualistic. The question that Amos and the rest of the prophets raise is, what is the shape of the world? What can we do to make that shape resemble the kingdom of God a little more closely? So what can we as individuals do to try and participate in God's passion for a different kind of social order? Trying to think about that this week, and I came up with a couple of ideas, and I hope that you'll think about them and add to them as well. But I'll share the three I came up with. One is to recognize that whatever our needs, we are part of a community. Whatever blessings that we have are not solely the result of our own efforts. And that we have a responsibility for those around us. In societies and cultures that take the common good seriously, life is better for everyone there, not just the wealthy. There are longer life expectancies and greater safety and reported happiness for everybody in cultures that take the common good seriously. And so I think part of what we can do is continue to advocate for more robust social services and safety nets, even if the result means that we as individuals might pay some higher taxes. Another thing I think we can do is to focus on gratitude. Gratitude for what we have. Look at how we can respond by choosing to participate in God's passion for a different kind of world. Part of the way our economy works is to make us be dissatisfied with what we have and always longing for more. Once we get more, we're programmed again to become dissatisfied with that until we have more. So simply practicing gratitude, being thankful for what we have, realizing that for others who do not have enough, we can continue to work for economic justice and dignity for them. And I began then as well by suggesting in the sermon that prophets like Amos were not predicting the future or foretelling of Jesus. That doesn't mean that the prophets didn't have an imagination for a different kind of future. So that's the third suggestion I'll offer. That we develop our prophetic imagination. Because it's hard to work for a different kind of world if we can't first imagine it or envision it. So I invite us to engage our own imaginations. I know I often struggle to believe that our future can be better than our past. Maybe you do as well. But making that future better for everyone, I think, begins by imagining it. Imagining something different. So I invite us to think, can we imagine the kind of future that Amos envisions? Can we develop our own prophetic imaginations? And the fourth one is to ask what you can add to that. Maybe not right this second, but I encourage you to think about that and share your ideas. What else can we do to live into Amos' vision for a more just world? Amen. We come to that time in our service where we collect our tithes and offerings. And I know, obviously, I began the service by reminding us of the importance of our support of this church in pledging. But I hope you think of this time as more than just that. Because any act of giving away some of our money, or some of our time, or anything else, recognizes, one, that we can exercise gratitude. You can come up and get the place while I'm sorry. That we can exercise, it's a way of showing gratitude for what we have. And it's a way of helping to share those resources in a way that hopefully helps to make community better for others around us. So I invite us to participate in this act, symbolic of maybe of trying to make our world and our community more closely reflect the vision of things. I invite us to remain standing. Our closing hymn this morning will be number 346, for the healing of the nations. As we sing it, I'd like to begin to pay attention especially to the words that they are here, how they reflect that same vision that we heard from the prophet Amos this morning. Over here, the Lord can my beloved siblings in God. It's so good to see your faces again. It is so good to be here. It's so good to be together if you're with us online. May whatever this week holds for you, may you find the blessings of God. May you experience the joy of being grateful, gratitude for what we have, including especially the gift of one another and of this community. And as you go out today, and whatever the day or this week holds for you, may the road rise up to meet you. May the wind blow always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rain fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the hollow of her hand. Amen.
Yep. Thank you, sir. This was a complete disaster.
Not your fault.
Like, I'm under so much stress because it was a complete disaster, and I didn't do this whole setup, and
It wasn't your fault.
You don't why are you getting stressed for it? It's not your fault. You don't have any of that. You just came in and was like, and then boom. That was an unfair setup for you. I'm going to go downstairs and see people. Stop obsessing with history.